Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a prophetic moment. A divine shift is happening in the lives of many who have endured trials, pain, confusion, and long nights of silent tears. And the Spirit of God is declaring, the chapter of hardship is closing. But I must tell you, whenever God closes a chapter, it is never random. He closes chapters because He's ready to write something new. And when God writes, He doesn't just scribble, He orchestrates. Many of you have been praying for relief, crying out for breakthrough, pleading for answers. But I'm here to announce that the struggle wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. The pressure you felt was not to break you. It was to shape you. There were things in your character that could only be built in the fire. There were lessons you couldn't learn in comfort. Sometimes God has to strip us to position us. Sometimes He must allow the storm so we can rediscover who the anchor truly is. You've been asking, why this long, Lord? Why this pain? Why this delay? But let me remind you that God doesn't deal with time. He deals with timing. He is the author and the finisher. He does not start a work He doesn't plan to finish. Your hardship was not a sign that God had forgotten you. It was a sign that He was forming you. If you judge your life by what you're feeling instead of what God is revealing, you will misinterpret your own process. God is strategic. He didn't let that door open because He knew it would distract you. He didn't let that person stay because they would sabotage your future. He didn't let you rise too quickly because your roots were not deep enough. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. Because promotion without preparation becomes destruction. The chapter of hardship was building muscles in the spirit that applause could never build. Listen carefully, every wilderness has an expiration date. The children of Israel wandered for 40 years, not because God couldn't take them in sooner, but because He was waiting for them to think differently. They came out of Egypt, but Egypt didn't come out of them. You cannot possess the promised land with a slave mentality. God will close a chapter not when you are tired, but when He sees you are ready. There are some of you who have been faithful in obscurity. You've been consistent when no one was watching. You prayed when it was dry. You gave when it was scarce. You worshipped when it hurt. And now the Lord is saying, I am closing the page of pain not just to end your struggle, but to usher you into strategy. Because God never ends a thing without beginning a better thing. He doesn't just deliver you from something. He positions you for something. The hardship wasn't just a tunnel. It was a corridor to destiny. Don't look for closure from people. God already signed the chapter closed. Stop revisiting pages that heaven has already sealed. You don't need everyone to understand your story when God is the one writing it. There are divine appointments that are now being activated because you endured. There are doors that wouldn't open until you proved faithful. There are mantles that don't rest on the casual. They fall on the crushed. The anointing flows not from comfort, but from crushing. So this next season is not just relief. It is realignment. God is bringing things into divine order. The pain pressed you, but now the oil will flow. The tears watered the ground, but now it's harvest time. The warfare was heavy, but now the weight of glory is coming. Don't miss the shift, because you're still mourning the season God is finished with. You can't walk into your next if you're still chained to your past. And hear me, when God closes a chapter, He does not negotiate with your emotions. He demands your obedience. It's not about how you feel, it's about what He said. Faith is not built in feelings, it's built in the fire. So wipe your eyes, square your shoulders, and prepare your spirit. A new chapter is not coming, it has begun. God never allows a season of hardship without a divine reason. He uses pressure to produce purpose. There is a principle embedded in the way God governs the earth. Everything operates by seasons. The sun has its time to shine, and the moon has its moment to rise. The ocean has its boundaries, and the rain has its appointment. The earth rotates with precision because the God who created it is not random. He is systematic. He does nothing by accident. And if nature obeys the rhythm of divine seasons, then your life is no different. The wilderness was never meant to be your destination. It was only meant to be your transition. It was the hallway, not the home. But if you don't discern the times and seasons, you'll begin to make permanent decisions in temporary places. Some of you have been in a season of survival for so long, you've mistaken it for identity. You've begun to believe that lack is normal, that silence is your portion, that warfare is your lifelong assignment. But I came to interrupt that lie With a divine announcement, your wilderness has an expiration date. Just because a season lasts long doesn't mean it's forever. God is not bound by time, but He works within time to reveal purpose. He's the kind of God who will let you wander just long enough to reveal what's inside you. Then suddenly, He shifts the entire terrain and declares, "You've been here long enough." That's what He told the children of Israel in Deuteronomy. After years of going around the same mountain, He said, "You have circled this mountain long enough. Turn north." In other words, the cycle is over, the shift is here. Seasons change not by your emotions, but by divine timing. You can cry, scream, and wish, but until God speaks, the season stands still. But when He speaks, everything changes. And I hear the Spirit of God declaring to His people, the season of suffering is closing. This was not just about enduring pain, it was about developing discernment. You had to learn that man does not live by bread alone. You had to realize that not every open door is a God door, and not every delay is a denial. The wilderness is where God reveals His character. When the Israelites had no food, He fed them. When they had no water, He gave it. When they had no direction, He led them. The wilderness is where God teaches you that He is enough. You don't truly know Jehovah Jireh until you've had no provision. You don't understand Jehovah Shalom until you've been surrounded by chaos. You don't grasp Jehovah Rapha until your body or soul needed healing. The wilderness strips away the excess until all you have left is God, and only then do you realize He was all you ever needed. But now, the cloud is moving. The pillar is shifting. The grace for that season is lifting. And when grace lifts, you must move. What once fed you will now frustrate you. What once covered you will now constrict you. That's how God signals a season change. He doesn't always announce it with a trumpet. Sometimes He announces it with a disturbance. You lose appetite for old places. Your spirit becomes restless in familiar surroundings. That's not confusion. It's a divine nudge that the page has turned. God is calling you out of survival mode and into strategy. You've been in survival so long that faith has felt like fiction. But the time has come to believe again, dream again, plan again. You're not just coming out of a season. You're stepping into alignment. This next phase will not be sustained by toil, but by timing. What took sweat will now take surrender. The doors that didn't open before will now swing wide, not because you worked harder, but because the season has shifted. Stop dressing for the wilderness when God is calling you into promise. Stop building tents when God is building temples. You can't plant roots in the desert and expect to bear fruit from Canaan. The manna is ceasing because milk and honey are next. You've been conditioned to expect just enough. But now God wants to show you overflow. This new season will not resemble the old one. And you must not carry the language of the wilderness into the vocabulary of destiny. Every wilderness has an expiration date. God is a God of seasons, and your season of suffering is closing. Too often we view the end of hardship as a reward. We think it's simply the moment we can breathe again, the season where the storm finally calms, the day the pain lifts and peace returns. But let me challenge that mindset, because in the kingdom, relief is never the goal. Relief is just the byproduct. The goal is realignment. God does not deliver you so you can be comfortable. He delivers you so you can be functional. Deliverance is not just about exiting Egypt. It's about entering purpose. You were not set free so you could relax. You were set free so you could realign with the assignment that's been on your life since before you were formed in your mother's womb. Many of us miss the meaning of our trials because we only seek to escape them, not extract from them. But God never wastes pain. If He allowed it, there was purpose in it. And when hardship ends, you must ask not only, what am I freed from? But what am I being positioned for? Because the end of a storm should never leave you the same. If you survived it, you ought to walk differently. If you came through it, your posture ought to change. The affliction didn't come to destroy you. It came to redirect you. This is what the enemy doesn't want you to discover. He's not just fighting your peace. He's fighting your purpose. He's not just attacking your finances. He's trying to silence your function. Because the longer you stay distracted by the trauma, the longer you delay the assignment. But God, in His mercy, is pulling you back into divine order. He's not just removing what hurt you. He's reestablishing what He called you to do before you were wounded. Sometimes God has to let you hit a wall so you stop running in the wrong direction. He'll let your strength fail so you stop depending on it. He'll let what once worked stop working so you ask better questions. Not, why is this happening to me? But, what is God trying to awaken in me? That's realignment. In Acts chapter 9, Saul was on a mission full of passion, full of zeal, and completely misaligned. But when he encountered the presence of God on the Damascus road, the light didn't just blind him, it redirected him. And when the light lifts, when the voice speaks, when the scales fall from your eyes, you no longer chase what you were chasing. You no longer fight the wrong battles. You no longer burn energy on broken assignments. You step into divine accuracy. And that is what the end of hardship is about. God is raising a people who are no longer obsessed with comfort, but consumed with calling. People who are not just grateful they made it out, but determined to find out why they were kept. Because the anointing on your life is not for survival, it's for impact. The enemy fought you so hard because he knew what you were carrying, and God allowed you to be pressed so the oil could flow in the right direction. This is why the end of a hard season can often feel unfamiliar. You're not going back to who you were. You're not returning to what was familiar. You're being reintroduced to the original you, the one God designed, anointed, and assigned before fear, failure, or fatigue stepped in. Realignment means God restores you to function. He reignites your gifts. He reactivates your vision. He reminds you that you're not here by accident. You're here on assignment. And I came to speak this prophetically over someone's life. God is realigning you. You thought He was just giving you peace, but He's giving you purpose. You thought He was just closing the storm, but He's opening your mouth. You thought He was just ending the hardship, but He's releasing a new flow of clarity, creativity, and conviction. He's not just healing your wounds. He's putting a sword back in your hand, so don't just shout over the end of suffering. Ask, Lord, what have you called me to build? What have you anointed me to do? What does obedience look like now? Because the pressure refined you, the fire purified you, but now it's time to function with precision. The end of hardship is not just relief. It is a realignment with your assignment. When God steps into your situation, He does not come merely as a rescuer. He comes as a strategist. He does not pull you out just to leave you empty. He delivers with direction. He rescues with a reason. And if all you see is the escape, you will miss the elevation. You see, too often we shout about what God brought us out of, and we should. We thank Him for breaking the addiction, silencing the enemy, healing the sickness, exposing the lie. But the truth is, in the kingdom, God never delivers just to deliver. He's not interested in just getting you out of bondage. He wants to lead you into dominion. He doesn't just save you from drowning. He sets your feet on solid ground and hands you a blueprint. He's a builder, and He never stops at demolition. The Exodus was not the conclusion. It was the beginning. God didn't bring Israel out of Egypt so they could wander endlessly. He brought them out so He could bring them into inheritance, into identity, into influence. Deliverance is only the doorway. You weren't just set free from something dark. You were set apart for something divine. This is where many believers fall short. They celebrate the release but ignore the responsibility. They rejoice over the chains falling off but forget to ask, "What now, Lord?" But if you do not understand what you were delivered for, you will eventually return to what you were delivered from, because purpose is what sustains freedom. When God brings you out, He changes your geography. But more importantly, He changes your posture. He shifts your focus from what broke you to what built you. He turns your eyes from your enemies to your assignment. You start realizing that everything that fought you was really pointing you to your function. The warfare around you was confirmation of the weight within you. And now that He's delivered you, He's saying, you're not just free, you're called. Positioning is strategic. God doesn't waste placements. He plants people on purpose. That's why He had to remove you from certain environments. That's why He had to disconnect you from people who couldn't go with you. That's why doors closed you didn't expect and opportunities disappeared that seemed perfect. Because positioning requires precision. God is not random. He orchestrates. He moves you where your voice will carry, where your oil will flow, and where your gift will grow. So don't misinterpret the transition. What felt like loss was really alignment. What felt like being overlooked was actually God hiding you until the right moment. What seemed like delay was divine setup. Because He's not just trying to make you comfortable. He's trying to make you impactful. You weren't just delivered from depression. You're being positioned to be a voice of healing for others. You weren't just set free from failure. You're being positioned to mentor, to lead, to rebuild. You didn't just survive the betrayal. You're being positioned to steward wisdom, to birth vision, to establish something that outlasts you. There is always purpose attached to your pain and destiny embedded in your deliverance. Look at Joseph. God didn't just deliver him from the pit. He positioned him in the palace. Why? Because the deliverance was not just about his survival. It was about the nation's preservation. Some of you are coming out of things that had nothing to do with your own comfort and everything to do with someone else's breakthrough. You were positioned to be a solution. So ask yourself, not just what did God bring me out of, but what is He calling me to build, lead, speak, or release now that I'm out? Because once you see your pain as positioning, your posture shifts. You no longer beg for survival. You start commanding atmosphere. You no longer shrink in fear. You move with clarity. You understand that you are not just a survivor. You are a steward of something sacred. God is not just delivering you from something. He is positioning you for something. One of the greatest marks of maturity in the kingdom is the ability to move when God speaks, even when you don't understand, because God does not operate by democratic process. He is not seeking votes. He is not polling for agreement. He is a king. And when a king speaks, it is law. When He closes a chapter in your life, He doesn't request your permission. He expects your obedience. There is something dangerous about clinging to a season God has already ended. When you try to resurrect what God has buried, you delay your own destiny. And many people are not stuck because of the devil. They are stuck because of disobedience. God said move, but you wanted closure. God said release, but you wanted explanation. God said let go, but you wanted validation. But in the kingdom, obedience is the door to acceleration. When Samuel mourned over Saul, God interrupted him with a question. How long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him? In other words, why are you holding on to what I've already moved on from? That's a hard truth, but a necessary one. Because sometimes the greatest act of faith is not asking God to fix it, but trusting Him when He says it's finished. You see, obedience is not always convenient. It rarely feels comfortable. It will require you to leave what's familiar, walk into what's unknown, and trust that His voice is enough to carry you. But obedience is the currency of the kingdom. Miracles are not attracted to need. They are attracted to obedience. If you want to see God's next, you must release your grip on the former. God never closes a chapter by accident. If He's shutting something down, a relationship, a job, a mindset, it's because it no longer aligns with where He's taking you. Some things are not evil, they're just expired. Some people are not enemies, they're just not assigned to your next. And if you refuse to let go, you'll find yourself out of step with divine timing. You'll be in the right place at the wrong time because you refuse to turn the page. This is why obedience is not optional, it's essential. You cannot carry yesterday's instruction into today's revelation. God gives fresh manna for each day. And the moment He says, move, your only responsibility is to respond. You don't need all the details. You don't need full visibility. You just need trust. Look at Abraham. God said, leave your father's house and go to a land I will show you. He didn't give him the full map. He gave him a command. And because Abraham obeyed without all the information, he stepped into covenant, legacy, and generational blessing. What if your next season is waiting on the other side of unreasoned obedience? Obedience will test your pride. It will strip your preferences. It will confront your logic. Because obedience is not about what you feel. It's about what God said. And when He says the chapter is over, you have two choices: stay in disobedience and call it discernment, or move in faith and call it surrender. There's a reason why God often closes doors without giving you a chance to negotiate. He knows that if He let you linger, you'd rationalize yourself back into dysfunction. If He gave you time to think, you'd find a way to hold on. So He shuts it abruptly, not to hurt you, but to protect what He's preparing for you. Because some chapters must be sealed so that destiny can be revealed. And I came to tell someone you've been praying for direction, but God has already spoken. He said leave. He said forgive. He said sow. He said shift. And now the next move is not His. The cloud has lifted. The fire has moved. The grace for that season is no longer available. Don't ask God to bless what He told you to walk away from, because obedience is not about understanding, it's about alignment. And when you align, heaven responds. Doors open, provision flows, clarity comes. Not because you figured it all out, but because you said yes when it didn't make sense. When God closes a chapter, He doesn't ask for your opinion. He requires your obedience. One of the greatest tragedies in the life of a believer is when God opens a new chapter, but you try to enter it with the same mindset that survived the last one. You can't walk into promise thinking like a prisoner. You can't build in Canaan while still grieving Egypt. God may bring you out of the struggle, but if you do not renew your mind, you will sabotage your success with survival language. It's not enough for God to shift your location. He must shift your mentality. That's why the wilderness lasted 40 years for Israel. It wasn't because God needed time. It was because they needed transformation. God got them out of Egypt in one night, but it took a generation to get Egypt out of them. Because they had the covenant in their blood, but captivity in their brain. They had the promise in front of them, but the past still echoing in their speech. Hear this. Your mindset will either be the passport or the prison for your next season. Some of you are standing at the edge of breakthrough, but you're still talking the language of bondage. You're still saying, I'm not enough. I've always failed. I'm not ready. What if it doesn't work? That's not the language of the kingdom. That's the residue of trauma. That's not the sound of victory. That's the vocabulary of fear. The promised land doesn't respond to complaints. It responds to conviction. You can't possess territory when you still think like a tenant. You can't operate in dominion when you still speak as a victim. And you can't steward increase if your mind is still tied to insufficiency. You must break the agreement with the old narrative before you can embrace the new assignment. God is not just trying to give you something. He's trying to make you into someone. The land of promise requires maturity. It requires vision. It requires the ability to speak life even when you still see giants. The Israelites forfeited destiny not because the land wasn't ready, but because their minds weren't. They said, we're like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And because of that confession, what should have taken days took decades. So many people pray for a new chapter but refuse to change the way they think. They want God to bring increase, but they think small. They want promotion, but they still see themselves through the lens of rejection. They ask for healing, but they speak sickness over themselves daily. You will always manifest the mindset you carry. That's why Romans says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation does not begin in your circumstances. It begins in your consciousness. You must detox your thoughts from old limitations. You must evict the lies you've believed. You must reprogram your language to match your new location. God told Joshua, be strong and very courageous, meditate on my word day and night. Then you will make your way prosperous and have good success. Did you catch that? Success didn't come by the sword. It came by the strategy of the Spirit. The victory was in his mouth before it was ever in his hand. Because a renewed mind creates a renewed atmosphere. And a renewed atmosphere attracts the resources of heaven. So if God is closing the chapter of hardship, don't just change your habits, change your headspace. Start speaking the language of your next. Start declaring, I am the head and not the tail. I am above only and not beneath. I am a lender and not a borrower. I am healed, whole, equipped, and assigned. Your words are containers of power. Don't let your past pain become the script for your future path. New chapters require new declarations. New seasons require new perspectives. And if God is bringing you into a land of promise, then your language must match His prophecy. No more rehearsing old wounds. No more confessing limitation. No more apologizing for favor. It's time to align your mouth with your mission. A new chapter requires a new mindset. You can't enter a land of promise with the language of pain. So hear me today, not with your ears, but with your spirit. God is closing a chapter of hardship. And when the King closes a chapter, it's not just a shift in season. It's a summons to destiny. What you have endured was not designed to destroy you. It was preparation for purpose. Heaven has scheduled a transition. The wilderness has expired. The page is turning. And now, the question is not, will God do it? The question is, will you move with Him? You cannot carry old wine into new wineskins. You cannot cling to expired patterns and expect fresh manifestation. God is inviting you to release your grip on what was so you can embrace what is to come. This is not the moment to second guess. This is the hour to obey. The cloud is moving. The door is open. The chapter is closing, but the calling is awakening. This is your moment to step out of survival and into strategy. This is your time to shift from crying over what broke you to building what will bless others. You were never meant to stay in the valley. You were being shaped there, refined there, but not assigned there. There is a sound coming from heaven saying, "Come up higher." The pain had a purpose. The delay was divine. But now the King is ready to reveal what was hidden behind the hardship. So don't just celebrate your escape. Step into your elevation. Don't just thank God for what's over. Prepare for what's opening. Your mindset must rise. Your language must shift. Your posture must align. Because what's ahead of you is greater than anything behind you. And you will not enter it by emotion. You will enter it by revelation. This is not just a new chapter. It's a new dimension. And God is not waiting on your feelings. He's waiting on your yes. Let the pain go. Let the fear go. Let the questions go. Trust the author of your story. Because when God closes a chapter, it's only because He has written something greater. And the pen is still in His hand.